I have invited my friend Andrew Edlin here today to talk with me about some of our favorite topics, for example, music. What turned you on to music in the beginning?
I was reflecting on this, and as a child in England, I had relatively few sources of music. There was a show a little later in the 60s called Top of the Pops, which would work up in about a half an hour to number one. And sometimes the group would play in the studio, and sometimes it would just be a recording. And so that was for pop music. But I was fortunate that I had two elder brothers, and my eldest brother, who was 7 years older than I, started to get into classical music. And so the first classical music I ever came across, I think, was the 1812 Overture by Tchaikovsky, which of course is scored for canon, amongst other things.
Of course.
Tchaikovsky, actually, I was reflecting, is a very good composer to start with, because he has that blend of lyricism and romanticism. It's very exciting, and you can hear a lot of the separate instruments very clearly. So he got me this record, and of course it was then 33 RPM record player, which had the 1812 Romeo and Juliet and the March Slav.
Oh, okay.
A very ponderous piece. And then somehow I acquired Sibelius, Karelia Suite, Finlandia, and those sorts of things. Fairly easy listening Sibelius. Sibelius is not generally easy listening. If you bought, the complete Sibelius, I think you'd get a shock. And the other was the New World Symphony.
Oh, yes.
And the New World Symphony was such an old recording that he gave me that it was then number 5. And I don't know whether you knew this, you probably did, that they later renumbered his symphonies, so now it's considered symphony number 9.
Oh, yes.
But back in the day, it was considered number 5. It's an oddity, but I didn't know any better. I've always loved that symphony. I know people consider it's overexposed and played too much.
Oh, no.
But I think it's a masterpiece. In fact, I've always been fond of Dvorak, and later on got to know his cello concerto, of course, which I think is an absolute masterpiece. As far as I can gather, no one had really thought of writing cello concertos until he did.
Right. But speaking of the symphony, the the New World Symphony.
Yes.
I think it's the best symphony ever written, quite frankly.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure I go quite that far, but I mean, it depends what your criterion are for great symphonies, but I mean, we could...
It grabs your attention from the beginning, and it doesn't let go.
Yes.
I mean, it's...
Like Beethoven's Fifth. I think if
yeah,
you were...
but that's overexposed.
It is, but they both are. But I mean, you can listen to Beethoven's Fifth, to my mind, any number of times, and I would propose that the mark of any great work of art, and perhaps particularly of music, is that it will survive repetition and repeated listening. I've certainly found that to be true of my favorite pieces. And of course, as you know, my favorite composer, Bruckner, who's gone from relative obscurity to sort of worldwide, I don't want to say notoriety, but you know what I mean. I was listening just about 3 days ago on the radio. I was coming back from somewhere in the evening, and I heard what I instantly recognized to be Bruckner's Eighth, and listened through to the end because I thought, this is very good. It's very slow, but it's beautifully played. Turned out to be a concert from Peking. Who knew? What an extraordinary thing that the Chinese are playing Bruckner. No wonder the world's in turmoil. But
before you get any further with Bruckner, because that could be very slow.
Yeah, it could take a long time, yes.
I asked you a question, now it's your turn.
Yes, so how did you first, what do you think about your first experiences or influences with music?
Well, it was very interesting because my parents had an old set of 78 records with Beethoven's Appassionata, performed by a Russian pianist lady called Galina Vashenska, completely unknown, probably not the best recording. It absolutely hypnotized me. For weeks I was just, there was one record for the first movement, and one record for the second movement, one record for the third movement, right? And I was going through those every day with headphones and just, wow. So then I started playing piano. My mother wanted me to start playing piano when I was 5 or 6. She was a pianist herself. She tried to teach me, which is impossible. A parent can't teach their kid anything, especially not music. So I said, no, I want to play ball games with my friends. So I waited until I was 13 before I actually...
I remember you telling me that it was relatively late that you learned to read music, but you took to it like a duck to water.
Well, so I started when I was 13, and then I got a real teacher who unfortunately didn't know how to teach technique or anything like that. He was just very inspiring. He was a great pianist. And of course his name was Jens Jensen.
He wouldn't have been Danish by any chance.
Very Danish, great pianist. And so from day one I could read music like a devil. I don't know where it came from. And but you know, I had to pick up the pace because I started too late, but that's a longer story. But anyways, that was how I got interested in music, especially classical music. So Beethoven turned me on, and later I took a little departure from Beethoven and went more into Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. And he's still my favorite composer, but my favorite thing to do is not to play other people's music, but to play my own music and improvise and compose and perform and all that kind of fun stuff.
I remember in the story 2001: A Space Odyssey, when the sole survivor on the spacecraft is basically going through the universe, and he's tried listening to all kinds of things. I mean, they've got this huge amount of music and books and so forth, and he cannot basically listen to anything else but Bach. That's the only thing which somehow provides a background or accompaniment to the majesty of the universe. And I thought, that's very perceptive. He somehow seems to have captured a position of superiority without offending anybody. I mean, everyone will admit that Bach is kind of the greatest, and then they'll go on to argue about the other people, but very few people would say, oh no, I don't think Bach is. I think...
I know one.
You do?
You like him. Dave Hurwitz.
Ah, yes, I know Dave very well, yes. Well, Dave takes pleasure in being contrary.
We should explain, Dave Hurwitz has a very active YouTube channel. He puts up 3 videos per day with excellent commentaries on classical music. And he has a little problem with Johann Sebastian Bach for some reason, and I can understand it. Bach can be very repetitive and mechanical and just keep pounding the same idea for a very, very long time. And if you're not into that, then Bach is not your favorite composer.
But again, as I said earlier, the sign of genius is to listen to the same thing over and over again, especially when it's not quite the same thing. I mean, there are various composers, I will be interested to hear your opinion on this, who I really feel never put a foot wrong. When you listen to their music, they just always seem to have got it right. And I would suggest amongst those, although there may be early stuff which is not up to scratch, but I would suggest Vivaldi, Handel, Chopin, Schubert.
Definitely.
Who just seem to be incapable of of writing bad music. And actually, if you want to get sort of controversial in some ways, the Beatles.
Oh yeah.
They went out of their way to try and write bad things and really couldn't.
The Beatles is now considered classical music. I
Yes.
think.
And because I was brought up in the 60s, it was very interesting to see that the parents' generation then were pretty violently opposed to pop music, which they saw as the sort of vanguard of destroying their belief systems. But I think the smart ones realized that the Beatles' music, leaving aside their other aspects of their personal lives, was remarkable, and particularly Leonard Bernstein, of course, was a great advocate of, look, you've got to look at this music, and was really someone that stepped forward to show that it was different and remarkable, and I always admired Bernstein very much for that.
The combination of John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and to some extent, of course, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, but mainly those two, is just dynamite.
It's astonishing.
As soon as they split up.
McCartney said they never, ever, not even once, sat down and came out without something.
Right.
I mean, you know, never just stormed off one of them and they then left nothing done. They managed, and normally without too much difficulty, to create something. And it's interesting in those tapes which have resurfaced, or maybe they were always there, broadly referred to as the Get Back tapes in Abbey Road. You see that process unfolding, and it's really quite extraordinary. And of course, most composers compose on their own. It's very unusual for a combination. You will have someone like Ravel, who took Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition and then, you know, transformed it.
But in this case, we could say that John was probably focusing more on the lyrics and Paul more on the music. And this is a thing we've seen Rodgers Hammerstein, we've seen Bernstein and Sondheim. That's a very common combination, lyrics and music. And boy, did they hit it. It was just incredible what John and Paul came up with. They had one unique characteristic that they both had experienced that created a bond between them that was unbreakable. Do you know what that was? They lost their mother at a young age.
Yes, I was going to say, you're talking about that, yes. And
so they became, you know, fast friends immediately when they realized that.
The interesting thing to me is the variety of the expression of their music. And I remember when I first became aware of them in the early 60s, and there was this sort of underlying excitement. I mean, I suppose my contemporaries were, you know, less than 10 when the first song started to come out. And then just this rising tide of their influence. I remember they were playing in my hometown in Brighton, and not that I asked my mother.
Brighton is here in Iowa.
Yes, we won't get into that.
Okay.
But on the south coast of England, I didn't even bother asking my mother if I could go and see them, because I think they played one theatre there 3 times, the Hippodrome. But I regret that I never saw them live. But of course they weren't around for that long. It was 7 years, was it? I think something like that.
Yeah.
Quite extraordinarily short period.
Yes.
I will mention briefly, and we talked about this a little bit before recording, that I watched these reaction videos.
Oh yes.
From people who are maybe from the age of 17, and then there's some older people or people in their 30s or whatever, and they're listening to music from my youth, for the first time. So that you have people who literally come on their little channel, as they call it, their YouTube channel, and say, you know, I've heard of the Beatles, but I've never actually heard Hey Jude, or I've never actually heard We Can Work It Out. And so they listen to this, and they're normally just blown away by how good it is. They didn't realize how much they would like it, and you just see, this is what fascinates me, in their face as you're watching the recording, the video recording, and then listening to it, that they're completely astonished by this, which they assumed was just going to be meh, not very interesting to them. And
yeah, I saw some of those videos, and it was very inspiring to see how they reacted to the music.
And also, which songs?
Yeah.
Because to them, and this happens to all people of, you know, in recent generations, the entire catalogue is dumped on them, like a set of
like a Bible.
playing cards. Yeah, it's all there. So they have no idea of what's early, what's late,
Right.
what's famous, what was a single, whatever that is, and they so they form the most interesting attachments to songs, and looking out in a broader focus, to groups. Or singers who are recognized for having these extraordinary voices, which in the 60s were not so unusual, but now are recognized as being particularly Dusty Springfield and Cilla Black, two English singers who were particularly powerful voices. It's a fascinating subculture, this reaction business, and I would certainly recommend to people to look at it. It can be an eye-opener. One of my favorite groups that I came to later, ironically, not until the late 70s, is Supertramp. And, you know, that's become, people are saying, well, Supertramp have got to be in the same room with Led Zeppelin. It's like, now that's a bizarre thing to hear from anybody.
Before we get too deep into band music, I just wanted to inform the audience that at some point, maybe you still do it, you were actually playing piano quite well.
Yes.
And your interest in music always struck me as being very deep and very devoted and very informed. You know a lot about classical music, and you have preferences of composers and pieces and that kind of thing. You asked me to, I was your teacher, by the way, do you remember that?
I do remember that, for some years indeed.
At some point you asked me if you could please play the second movement of Beethoven's Piano Concerto number 5, right? And so we had to sit down and figure that one out.
Bruckner's third Adagio, which we worked on, and
did you have him make a piano arrangement of some Bruckner thing?
You worked it out for me, yes, the very beginning, because it was, and I think it was probably relatively new to you, if you might have heard it at some point, but
right.
How much I converted you to my passion for Bruckner, who knows? And I'm not even asking. But
please don't.
Yes. Well, thank you for those kind words. Yes, it has always been a very important part of my life, and I was very lucky that I was born and raised in Brighton, as we said, and that's about an hour by train to London. So I was able to, when I was a bit older, to travel on my own and go and see not only the 4 resident London orchestras, but also orchestras from the continent, like the Concertgebouw from Amsterdam, playing. And I think I did actually realize I was very lucky at that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it cost 50 pence, which is, it doesn't count as anything in today's money. Probably the equivalent of less than $1 for a ticket to go and see the best orchestras, best conductors, best soloists, and that absolutely solidified my love of classical music, because a love of live music, and however good a streaming event is, or a radio event, or recorded event is as nothing.
Live is king.
Live is king.
And so this,
particularly with the piano.
Yeah, I'm reminded of another thing we talked about recently. When this music came out, when Schubert wrote his symphonies, and Beethoven and all those people wrote their music, how could people actually get to hear that music unless they were in a big town and the orchestras came through pretty often? If they were out in a smaller town, how could they listen to that new music? And the way they did it, they bought a four-hand piano score of a Beethoven symphony or a Schubert symphony, and then they sat down at an upright piano and played four-hand piano. That's how they got to hear it.
Yes.
No recordings, obviously.
No.
And no, usually it would take years before they could hear a live performance of a symphony.
And indeed the composers themselves sometimes never got to hear some of their works.
Oh yeah.
Which was, I can't imagine. It was
But can you imagine
sad.
the immediacy and the informedness of actually playing something, sight reading, playing it, getting it to work, and experiencing it that way?
Well, still,
compared to now buying or going online, YouTube video, whatever it's called, streaming, and you can get pretty much everything, right?
Everything.
At a split second.
But still in those countries where those composers lived, playing music is pretty well standard. Hardly anyone grows up without playing some instrument of some kind, and often multiple instruments. And so that tradition of people playing music has remained extremely strong. I remember once coming through customs in Germany with something I'd bought, and the customs officer, you know, as I declared what I'd bought and what I was doing, and said, "Oh, this is excellent. Yes, you know, my brother has it." And I thought, nowhere else but Germany would you have a customs officer commenting on a relatively obscure acquisition. It's
well, maybe in Denmark.
Well, maybe, and certainly not in England, I don't think. But
definitely not in the United States of America.
Probably not.
No,
I don't think so. It's the whole notion of classical music is very interesting in how it changed and how it reflects the world around it, and how it suddenly takes these leaps into forms that previously, only a matter of decades before, not even generations before, would have been quite unacceptable and almost caused riots. One of my other favorite composers, Shostakovich, who I think, you know, unquestioned genius. I mean, when you first listen to some of his music, you think, no, that's not right. That's just too much. It strains at your brain, and it's taking it into unusual places. But I encountered his music when I was about 15, and fortunately, I'd already started listening to quite a lot of classical music, and so the jump to him was not as big as it would have been for some people. I never did make the jump to Stockhausen.
Right. But let's put a pin in it here. We had decided to do many videos, but not too long, because people's attention span is a little short. The human nervous system has the attention span of a goldfish.
And I mentioned Stockhausen, which I knew was a bad mistake, because that normally puts people immediately screaming to the exits, I think.
Right, so now we're going to the exit.